patron saint of youth, young women, purity, and victims of rape. Who could that be? We're going to find out in just a second, but welcome to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. You are listening to the Dr. Luis Sandoval Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Luis Sandoval, happy to be here to share our Catholic faith. As we are coming up on Lent, it's so important to really pray and to think about, where is my life headed and where do I want my life to go? When we start talking about that, I think it's important to think about the saints, because we do so many things during Lent where we say we're going to give certain things up or reform our lives in certain ways. And I think that that's really important. But sometimes we don't know where to start, what direction to move in, or how to even go about it. Well, let's look at a few saints. So let's look at the lives of a few saints, as many as we can get in the show here, to see, how do our guides make it to heaven themselves? You know, Lent can feel overwhelming for some people. And I know a lot of our listeners out there, a lot of our audience, a lot of our Virgin Most Powerful Radio family, it's easy to feel overwhelmed at times. We go through so much. I get so many different people reaching out to me and saying, you know, I think that there's so much going on in my life. I feel like I'm just falling into a pit. Don't know how to get out of it. I'm feeling very heavy right now. I'm feeling like I'm being attacked. I feel like, you know, the demons are pushing at my door and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get past that. I feel like there's so many things in my life. I just want to get rid of all this darkness. And we don't even know where it's coming from sometimes. That's one of the hardest parts, because we think, am I living the life I'm supposed to live? Am I living an exemplary life? I'm trying to be a good Catholic. Boy, you know, I go to church, and Dr. Sandoval, sometimes I'm there and I feel like I can't even go receive communion because this darkness overcomes me. What am I supposed to do with that? That's a good question as to where does that darkness come from? I mean, it's a common feeling. As Catholics, as devout Catholics, it's very easy to say, I think it's the devil. I think there's demons attacking me, and that's what's causing the darkness. I never discount that. We read the Gospels. We see what's going on in our Catholic faith. We know that Jesus drove out demons from people, real demons, shall we say, demons from hell. But there's different demons that we deal with as well, demons that we carry. And by those demons, I don't mean devils in hell or anything like that. I mean, sometimes we carry certain burdens that we don't know how to get rid of. You know, one of those can easily be, I don't know how to forgive people. I'm carrying this burden of not forgiving people, and I'm carrying around hate. You know, we say unforgiveness. We carry around hate. We carry around resentment. We carry around anger. And all those things really bring us down. That's not good spiritually, at least from a spiritual perspective. Any exorcist will tell you, you know, you carry that around. That's like candy for demons. They're just going to attach to that. From a psychiatric perspective, what I would say is, that's a heavy burden on the mind, and it's not going to allow you to move forward. And it can easily lead to a depression. How many times do we just feel depressed? We feel like, I'm just not feeling good. Like, I know that there's joy out there, but I don't experience it. I see other people are happy, and I don't know how to cross this barrier from where I'm feeling emotionally to feeling happy like those people that seems like they're enjoying life. I'm here in the same place. I might be in the same park. I might be at the same beach. I might be at the same coffee shop. They seem to have joy in their life, and I don't have that. We're in the same area. I can't say it's because I'm in a worse off place necessarily physically, but interiorly, I don't know how to cross that line. And that can be really, really challenging. Why? Because we've got to ask ourselves, sometimes there's clinical depression, right? Where's it coming from? Sometimes it's clinical depression. And I say, yeah, you know, this is a medical condition, just like anything else, just like having high cholesterol, diabetes, anything along those lines. Depression can happen. It's a condition of the brain where you look at the brain chemistries and you take some medication, and sometimes that helps. Or you go to therapy. Therapy changes the chemistries of the brain, and sometimes that helps as well. But sometimes if we're carrying certain things, that it's a little bit tougher. You know, a lot in the world of therapy and psychology, we're not trained in how to deal with guilt or resentment or things along those lines, right? We diagnose certain things. In fact, some people debate, should that even be something that is dealt with by psychiatrists, right? That's something more human life. It's, where are we as a society? Do we sit down and are we able to just have a chat with each other and say, yeah, I'm not feeling good, and it's okay, and not be judged, and think, how do I move forward from these feelings? I'm really angry at my parents. I'm really angry at my spouse, at my kids, or whoever it is, and at my friend, and I carry these feelings where I don't know what to do about it. Is it possible to let that go? One of the challenges is that's going to bring us down. And how do I forgive? How do I do that? Well, Let's look at the lives of the saints. Let's look at some saints who maybe had reason to feel angry or resentful, but chose to forgive and chose to put God first. That's a good place to start. So I started the show by reading about a patron of the youth, young women, purity, and victims of rape. And who could this be? Well, this saint was born in October 16th, 1890, died July 6th, 1902, was beatified by Pope Pius XII on April 27th, 1947, and was canonized by Pope Pius XII 3 years later in 1950. And her feast day is on July 6th, because that's when she passed away. And this is Saint Maria Goretti. So if anybody doesn't know about Saint Maria Goretti, let's go ahead and read that and think about her life as we're going into Lent and we're thinking, what am I going to do spiritually moving forward? So there's a good article. I'm going to put a link to this article. It's just from Catholic Online. And I think it's a really important story that she has to tell. And by story, I don't mean to diminish her life. What I mean is stories are what we remember in life. I don't remember a whole lot of things from grade school as far as what I was wearing or what the teacher taught on a certain day. But I remember stories about what happened to my friends or how we lived life together during those years or things that might have happened to me. That's what really sticks to us. I want to hear her story because I want to hear about who she is. A lot of times when we read about saints, we just think that they are holy people who we can never reach those heights. Well, I hope that we reach those heights because that's what's going to get us into heaven. We have to be saints. We all have to have that degree. There's no way around it. Well, let's read about her a little bit here. It says she was born October 16th, 1890 in Corinaldo in the Ancona province in Italy. Her farm worker father moved his family to Ferrara di Conca near Anzio, where he died of malaria, and Maria's mother had to struggle to feed her children. Already there's controversy here, and there's suffering. It's not an easy life. So let's start by thinking about that. This is where the story starts. This is why I say, let's look at the story. Let's analyze the story a little bit to see where she's coming from. Her parents, it doesn't say whether they got along or not. And I say this because, a lot of people who come to me say, gosh, I came from a really rough household. My parents were always arguing, or my parents were divorced, or I never felt like there was a warm feeling at home. I never felt comfortable at home. And that happens, right? But in this case, I don't know that her parents got along or not. But what I can tell you is her father had to move the family, and that's not easy, right? A farm worker, why would he have to move the family? Did he have bad land? Were they not making it? Were they struggling to make ends meet? Did he think that he was going to take the family somewhere to have a better life? Well, we usually do that, right? So moving the family is a big deal. And then he moves, but he dies of malaria. So all of a sudden we lose the father figure, and her mother is left to struggle to feed the children. What do? We're looking at 1890, Italy. I doubt that there was this idea that women could have careers and degrees like we do now. We take advantage now of, you can go to college, you can have a job just like anybody else. But in this particular case, her mom had to struggle to feed the children. Well, let's see what else happened here. Maria's mother, brothers, and sisters, they worked in the fields while she cooked, sewed, and kept the house clean, and watched her youngest sister, Teresa. So Maria Goretti had to stay home while her brothers and sisters, they worked in the fields, right? And her mother, so they all had to go work in the fields to make ends meet, and she had to be the homemaker. Her family had moved. Her father had died of malaria, and they were struggling to make ends meet, but they loved God. It said, though the family circumstances were extremely difficult, they were very close and loved God. I would dare say, I would flip that around. I would say they loved God and they were very close. That's really what brings us together. We put the love of God first. So let's see what happens to our good friend, St. Maria Goretti. On July 5th, 1902, she was sitting outside the steps of her home, sewing a shirt. Sitting next to it says her 18-year-old brother or neighbor. It's unclear if it was her brother or neighbor, but his name was Alessandro. And she was sewing his shirt. And while he was working in the barnyard, it says that she concentrated on her sewing. He surprised her and grabbed her from her steps from where she was sitting. And when he tried to rape her, Maria cried that it was a mortal sin and warned he would go to hell. Okay. This is a big deal. Let's look at this. Let's look at why. In that moment, It tells me, Maria Goretti wasn't yelling at him and telling him that he was bad or that, anything of the world or anything along those lines. She cried that it was a mortal sin and warned that he would go to hell. Her heart, that's what this tells me her heart was with God. It tells me that she was worried about what the act meant. She wasn't even thinking about herself in that moment. Notice that? She was saying, no, this is not good. This is going to hurt God. I realize that you're going to try to hurt me here. I understand what you're doing, but it's not about me. She didn't say this is going to hurt me. She said, this is going to hurt God. We can't do this. When Alessandro persisted, she fought him and screamed, no, it is a sin. God does not want it. At her words, Alessandro began to choke her, and she said she would rather die than submit. Upon hearing her words, Alessandro pulled out a knife and stabbed her 11 times. When she attempted to reach the door, he stabbed her 3 more times, then fled. Well, let's take a step back and look at this. This is a very, very violent scene. This is not good. He's trying to force himself on her. The whole time, she's worried about offending God. She's the victim here, and she's worried about offending God. She's saying, no, we can't do this. This is a sin. She was worried about him and told him, no, you're going to go to hell. God does not want us to do this. And what did he do? She said she would rather die. And he said, all right, pulled out a knife, and he began to stab her. What demons were plaguing him is really the question. He was overcome with this from even before the time he reached her. Something was brewing in his mind, the same way something was sitting in her mind and heart. This is really what I wanted to look at in this particular scenario. We read this and we realize this is a very violent scene. It's hard to really fathom it. It's hard to absorb it because it's a bit much. You got this young gal here. She's sitting there. She's just going about her work, and he obviously doesn't have good intentions. But I think that this is important to consider, not just the scene of the sin of rape, obviously, and him forcing himself and stabbing her. But if we take it a step back, before this occurred, we have to ask ourselves, what was in each of their hearts? As we're going into Lent, this is what's really important. We think that we have to do a lot of things in Lent. I want to give this up. We do a lot of these physical things. And by physical, I mean, I'm going to give up candy, or I'm going to give up soda, or I'm going to make sure that I keep my room clean or something along those lines. And that's great. But all these physical things, all these physical signs really we need to ask ourselves, what does that mean about the condition of my heart? How is this going to change my heart? What is it that I'm going to put in my mind before I even do these things? If we look at the scene, while she is there, and says she was sewing the shirt, it says that he was threshing beans in the barnyard. Okay, so they're both working. But what's in each of their hearts while they're working? Obviously, her heart is turned to God. She's sewing a shirt, and the whole time she's thinking about God. Remember, before this, it said that they loved God and they were a close family. In his particular case, what was he doing? He was working. He was threshing beans, obviously something that they needed to do for the household. But where was his heart? His heart obviously was not in a state of purity. His mind was not in a state of purity. His mind was he wanted to go and overtake her. He wanted to go fulfill whatever his flesh needs were at that time, whatever that sexual drive was at that time. That's what was in his mind and heart. He wasn't fighting that off. I don't know that she was ever tempted by thoughts of purity or impurity or to impurity. We don't know that part of her. But what we do know is that in this particular scenario, as he was coming to her, if she was tempted, she must have been fighting those off. If she was tempted for anything, she must have been fighting them off. Her mind was turned to God. And if we're in that moment, we ask ourselves, in that moment, what am I going to do? She was saying, no, I don't want any of this. I don't want to hurt God. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to have a mortal sin on my soul. And that's very powerful. I think that's what we really need to get our hearts to during this Lenten season. Not so much what am I going to give up, but what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do during this Lenten season? What sacrifice am I going to make so that my heart is turned to God, so that I'm focused on God, so that I might be able to say, no, I'm not going to hold a grudge because that's going to hurt God. I'm not going to not forgive somebody because that's not going to allow me to get to heaven if I hold on to that unforgiveness. Am I ready to do that? Because it's a violent scene, that unforgiveness, that sense of hatred towards somebody. It's almost a rape of the soul, a rape of the heart, a rape of the mind, if you will. Because I have so many people coming to me and telling me, Dr. Sandoval, I just have this burden on me. It's just that I feel like these thoughts are attacking me and I don't know how to get rid of them. It's like it's invading my mind. I don't want these thoughts there. Sometimes I'm thinking about wishing ill will on people. I'm thinking about people who have done me wrong, and I want to hurt them. And I'm harboring anger, and I'm not going to forgive them because somehow I think that if I don't forgive them, or if I do forgive them, like that's giving them a pass. And if I don't forgive them, I feel like I'm hurting them. But the reality is they don't even know if you're forgiving them or not. It's only happening in our own hearts. Well, we see the scene of St. Maria Goretti's life. We see that she's just been stabbed. How does she handle it? In that moment, she made a decision for God. Does she regret her decision? What goes on in her life? We've all been attacked. We've all been hurt in some ways. How do we move forward from that? Well, let's see what happens here to her. It says, Teresa woke to the sounds of her sister's cries and began to cry. So that's her sister, woke up, and she began to cry. Maria's family returned home and found her bleeding on the floor. They quickly took her to the nearest hospital in Nettuno, where she underwent surgery without anesthesia. All right, here we go. We're being attacked. How many times has this happened to us? We're being attacked. We feel like we're being stabbed. We feel like we're bleeding. And then on top of that, we're going to go fix it. And it's even more painful to try to fix our wounds. In her particular case, obviously big time wounds. It says that he had stabbed her 11 times and then add another 3 to that because she was trying to flee. So she's got 14 stab wounds. Trust me, as a physician, I've healed people I've helped people out with their stab wounds. I remember I was working in the emergency department, and there was a gentleman who came from the beach, and he had been surfing, and he got caught in a riptide, and one of the fins from the surfboard sliced his leg, and I had to go in there and I put in some stitches. Believe me, he needed anesthesia for that one slice, and it was just one. It was a big one, but it was one. And it takes multiple layers. You got to get in there and you got to see how deep these wounds are. You got to put stitches in for the muscles and the fascia and then the skin and, all the different areas that need to be fixed. In her case, she's got 14 stab wounds. I don't know how many stitches she would have needed, but no anesthesia. Let's just say the level of pain for that is unfathomable. We think we're going through pain. We got to think of St. Maria Goretti during this time of Lent and think she underwent surgery without anesthesia. She had to go through pain on top of pain. And I wonder how much of this she was experiencing spiritual pain. Because how many times do we say, gosh, I'm going through this pain. I'm having a difficult time at work, dealing with my boss, my coworkers. Can I offer this up to God? This is painful. This is painful. It might not be the same physical pain that we see here for St. Maria Goretti, but how many times am I experiencing spiritual pain, social pain, pain of hanging around people where I feel trapped, I can't do anything, I'm on a surgical bed, and for me to pray, it feels like I'm being operated on without anesthesia. Can I offer up that pain? So we still don't know what she did here. All we know is that she was attacked, she was taken to the hospital at this point, and she's undergoing surgery without anesthesia. Now, unfortunately, her wounds were beyond the surgeon's ability to help. Halfway through the surgery, the man asked her, Maria, think of me in paradise. So at this point, the surgeon's already letting her know, you're going to die. And please say a prayer for me, right? If you go up to the great beyond, say a prayer for me, because it looks like we're not going to make it here. And we're only halfway through the surgery. As she went on the table, she looked up at him and said, well, who knows which of us is going to be there first? She hasn't lost her faith. She's saying, I don't know that I'm going to die right now or not. I realize I'm in pain. I realize I'm bleeding. I know what you see. And you're the professional. You're the doctor. And you're telling me that this isn't going to work. I would trust the doctor, right? I would trust my surgeon who tells me, look, based on my experience, it looks like this is it. Start praying, do something. Think of me in paradise. Pray with me when you get there. Yet she's got this level of faith where she's saying, you're still not God. God's still in charge. Remember, she had God in her heart from the beginning. It doesn't stop that way. Are we able to do that? This is something that we're, and it's challenging. I can't speak for everybody, but are we able to say, hey, you're not God and only God is God. And I don't know what's going to happen here at my workplace. I don't know what's going to happen as far as, me getting along with my boss, not getting along with my boss, my coworkers. What's going to happen there? Not sure. But here's what he says. So it says, she did not realize how terrible the situation was. And the surgeon replied, you, Maria. And she said, then I'll gladly think of you. And she's like, okay, if this is where it is, I'll think of you. She also mentioned concerns for her mother. The next day, Maria forgave Alessandro, and she said she wanted to see him in heaven with her. She died that day while looking upon the image of the Virgin Mary and holding a cross to her chest. So Here's the big challenge for us. She was just attacked by this man who, first of all, was trying to take her virtue, was trying to take her virginity. The reason why she was attacked, that's pretty brutal. He stabs her for really obviously no good reason. He stabs her because of his own hatred, his own selfishness, his own inability to think of God the way she was thinking of God. He stabs her because he's angry and he wants to steal from her. He really wants to steal her virginity, her virtue. He sees it as a crime of opportunity, if you will. Somebody's there. And all of a sudden, she tells the surgeon, okay, well, if I'm going to die, I'll gladly think of you. She's worried about her mother. She doesn't say anything about herself. She's not even saying, get me a priest right now. What about me? She's saying, all right, this is it. Praying for her mother. She forgives him and she wants to see him in heaven with her.